Beauty and elegance were dangerous sins on the western frontier, and Bella Hamilton was guilty from the moment she arrived. The stagecoach rolled into Harrow Creek on a Tuesday, which the town would later agree was the wrong day for anything important to happen. Tuesdays were for mending fences and settling debts. Not for a woman like Bella Hamilton stepping down from a dusty coach in a dress that cost more than most men earned in a season. She descended without assistance. The driver had offered his hand. She had declined it politely, the way a woman declines something she has never needed. The town watched. They always watched strangers. But they watched her differently. She was too composed for the frontier. Too still. Her traveling dress was deep green, slightly dusty at the hem, her dark hair pinned with the kind of precision that suggested habit rather than vanity. She carried one trunk and a leather satchel she did not set down. "Miss Hamilton?" A man from the land office stepped forward, hat in hand. "Mrs. Reynolds," she corrected quietly. The correction landed like a stone in still water. Ripples moved outward through the gathered faces. She was not yet Mrs. Reynolds in any way that mattered. The papers had been signed in Charleston 3 weeks ago, arranged through a solicitor her father's lawyer had contacted on her behalf. Cole Reynolds needed a wife to satisfy the terms of a land inheritance. Bella Hamilton needed a reason to leave a life that had stopped belonging to her. It was a practical arrangement. Both parties had agreed to that plainly. The land office man cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds sent a wagon. He couldn't come himself. Ranch business." Bella looked at the wagon. A single horse, a weathered seat, a driver who did not meet her eyes. "Of course," she said. She climbed up without comment and did not look back at the town as the wagon rolled north. The Reynolds ranch sat at the edge of a wide valley, backed by hills that turned purple at dusk. The main house was large by frontier standards, built from timber and stone, functional rather than beautiful. A barn stood to the east. Corrals stretched beyond it. Cattle moved in the far distance like slow dark clouds. Cole Reynolds stood on the porch when the wagon arrived. Bella had formed no particular image of him from the solicitor's letters. The letters had been brief, factual, and entirely without warmth. She had respected that. She had written back in kind. He was taller than she expected, lean in the way of men who worked rather than exercised. His face was weathered, angular, carrying the particular stillness of someone who had learned long ago that expression cost more than it returned. He wore no hat. His dark hair was cut short. A scar ran faint along his jaw, old enough to have faded to silver. He watched her descend from the wagon. She watched him watch her. Neither spoke for a moment. "Miss Hamilton," he said finally. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said again. Same tone. Same quiet correction. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not hostility. Something more careful than either. "The house is ready," he said. "Housekeeper left last month. You'll manage things as you see fit." He turned and went inside. Bella stood in the yard, her satchel in hand, the dust settling around her boots. Behind her the driver was already unloading her trunk. Ahead the door stood open, waiting. She had left Charleston with nothing she intended to keep. A father's debts, a broken engagement, a social world that had quietly closed its doors the moment her family's money ran out. She had chosen this. She reminded herself of that now. She picked up her satchel and walked inside. The kitchen was cold. The stove needed blacking. The pantry held enough for a week if she was careful, less if she wasn't. Bella stood in the center of the room and took inventory the way her mother had taught her, not with despair but with arithmetic. She had managed her father's household from the age of 16. She had kept accounts, managed staff, negotiated with suppliers who assumed a young woman could be misled. She had not been misled. This was simply a different set of numbers. She found an apron on a hook near the door. She put it on over her traveling dress. She lit the stove. Cole appeared in the doorway an hour later. He stopped when he saw the fire going, the table cleared, a pot already beginning to heat. "You cook," he said. "I manage," Bella replied without turning around. A pause. "Supper's usually at 6. "I know. I read the letter." He left without another word. She exhaled slowly. The fire crackled. Outside the wind moved through the grass with a sound like breathing. Supper was quiet. Cole ate without complaint, which Bella took as approval. He did not offer conversation. She did not force it. They sat at opposite ends of a table built for more people than occupied this house, and the silence between them was not comfortable, but it was honest. "The east pasture fence needs mending," Cole said eventually. "I saw it from the wagon." He looked up. "The third post from the creek crossing," Bella added. "It's leaning. If the cattle push against it, in the next rain it'll go down." Cole set his fork down. He studied her with the expression of a man recalculating something. "I'll send a hand tomorrow," he said. "I can help." "You don't need to." "I know I don't need to," Bella said evenly. "I'm offering." Another pause. Cole picked up his fork again. 6 in the morning, he said. "Dress for mud." She dressed for mud. The work was harder than she had anticipated and easier than she had feared. Cole worked without explaining himself, which meant she had to watch carefully and ask only when necessary. She asked twice. He answered both times without impatience. By mid-morning the fence stood straight. Her hands ached. Her boots were ruined. She did not mention either. On the ride back, Cole glanced at her once. "You've done outdoor work before." "Not exactly," Bella said. "But I learned quickly." I noticed. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. But from Cole Reynolds, she was beginning to understand. Observation was its own form of acknowledgement. 3 days later, they rode into town for supplies. The autumn market was crowded. Wagons lined the main street, loaded with grain and timber. Cole went to the blacksmith, leaving Bella by the general store hitching post with their 2 horses. Suddenly, a heavy freight wagon lost its rear wheel down the street. The sharp crack of splintering oak sounded like a gunshot. A young black stallion hitched nearby reared instantly, pulling its leather reins free from the wooden rail. The horse panicked, its hooves striking the wooden boardwalk, sending a row of metal milk cans crashing down. The crowd scattered. A small girl, no older than 4, stood frozen in the dirt road directly in the stallion's path. Bella did not yell. She did not look around for Cole. She grabbed the long leather-led rope from her own gray mare. Moving with flat, steady strides, she cut across the dirt yard. She caught the little girl by the collar of her dress, swinging her cleanly behind a heavy barrel of flour. The stallion came fast, eyes rolling white. Bella did not step back. She raised her arms wide, snapping the heavy leather rope hard against her green skirt with a sharp, crackling sound. "Whoa," Bella said. Her voice was not high. It was loud, heavy, and completely level. The stallion hesitated, its front hooves skidding in the loose dirt just 3 feet away. In that exact second of hesitation, a large hand reached past Bella's shoulder. Cole had appeared. He grabbed the horse's broken bridle, twisting his arm with brutal efficiency, forcing the animal's head down until its nose touched the dirt. The stallion went still, blowing hard. Cole handed the stallion's reins to the storekeeper, who ran out. Then he turned to Bella. He looked down at her boots, then at her green dress, which was now torn at the hem. "You stayed in front of him," Cole said. His voice was rough, his chest rising and falling. "He was looking for an exit," Bella said simply, wiping a streak of street dust from her forearm. "If I ran, he would have run through." Cole looked at the little girl behind the barrel, then back at Bella. He did not say thank you. He reached out and took the heavy lead rope from her hand. "Let's get the flour," he said. They walked into the store together. The town of Harrow Creek formed its opinions quickly and revised them slowly. By the end of Bella's first week, the general store had already established the primary narrative. A Southern woman, clearly accustomed to comfort, had married Cole Reynolds for his land. Cole Reynolds, who had never shown interest in any woman, had married her for reasons no one could quite agree on. The most popular theory involved the inheritance clause in his uncle's will, which required a wife before the deed transferred fully. Bella heard the theory secondhand, through the careful silences that fell when she entered the store, through the way conversations shifted when she approached. She bought her supplies without comment. She greeted people by name when she knew them. She did not defend herself. The storekeeper's wife, a broad-shouldered woman named Ruth, watched her one morning as Bella reviewed a supply list with quiet efficiency. "You know what you're doing," Ruth said finally, as if the observation surprised her. "I've kept accounts before," Bella replied. Ruth studied her. "Cole's last housekeeper couldn't add past 10. I can add past 10. Ruth almost smiled. "I imagine you can." It was not friendship, but it was the first crack in the wall, and Bella had learned long ago that cracks were where everything began. Cole Reynolds did not trust easily. He had learned that lesson in the war, reinforced it in the years after, and built his life around its logic. He trusted his land. He trusted his horses. He trusted the handful of men who had worked for him long enough to prove themselves through action rather than words. He did not trust strangers. He especially did not trust strangers who arrived with good manners and hidden histories. Bella Hamilton had both. He watched her those first weeks the way he watched new horses. Not with suspicion exactly. With attention. Waiting to see what she did when things went wrong. Things went wrong on a Thursday. One of the ranch hands, a young man named Denny, had miscounted the cattle coming in from the north pasture. 12 head were missing. Cole discovered it at dusk, too late to ride out before dark. He stood in the yard, jaw tight, calculating the loss. Bella appeared beside him. She had been helping in the barn, her sleeves rolled, her hair coming loose from its pins. 12 head, she said. He looked at her. I counted when they came through the gate, she said simply. I noticed the number was short. I didn't know if it was my error or the count. Where did you learn to count cattle? I didn't, she said. I learned to count inventory. The principle is the same. Cole was quiet for a moment. North pasture. They likely push through the creek crossing if the water's low. The fence on the east side of the crossing is still soft from the repair, Bella said. If they pushed through there, they'd be in the Henderson draw. Cole looked at her fully then. Not with the careful measuring look she had grown accustomed to. With something more direct. I'll ride at first light, he said. I'll come. He started to refuse. She met his eyes and held them. I ride, she said. I was raised on horses. I won't slow you down. He nodded once. First light. They found the cattle in the Henderson draw before noon. Bella rode without complaint through terrain that would have turned back a less determined woman. She did not pretend the work was easy. She did not pretend it was hard. She simply did it. On the ride back, driving the cattle ahead of them, Cole spoke without preamble. Why did you agree to this arrangement? Bella kept her eyes on the cattle. The same reason you did. Practicality. That's not an answer. She was quiet for a moment. My father died with debts I didn't know about. The house was sold. The engagement I had was to a man who wanted the Hamilton name, not me. When the name stopped being worth anything, he found reasons to end it. She paused. I had education, capability, and no particular place to apply them. Your solicitor's letter offered a place. Cole said nothing. Why did you agree? She asked. The will required it. That's not an answer either, she said. A pause. Something that might have been the beginning of a smile crossed his face and disappeared. No, he said. It isn't. They rode the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence than before. Less like distance. More like two people deciding, without saying so, that honesty was worth the risk. The first real storm came in October. It arrived without the usual warning, the sky turning green at the edges before the wind hit. Rain followed fast and hard, the creek rising within an hour. Cole was out checking the south herd when the water began moving toward the lower barn. Bella saw it from the kitchen window. She did not wait. She pulled on her coat and ran. The lower barn held 3 horses and a calf born 2 days early, still unsteady on its legs. The water was already at the door when she arrived. She got the horses out first, leading them one by one to higher ground, her boots sinking in the mud, the rain driving sideways. The calf was harder. It was frightened and too weak to move quickly. She lifted it, staggering under the weight, and carried it up the slope as the water rushed in behind her. Cole found her on the hillside 20 minutes later, soaked through, sitting in the mud with the calf's head in her lap, keeping it calm. He dismounted and stood looking at her. The horses, he said, tied at the upper rail. All 3. He looked at the barn, half submerged now, then back at her. You carried the calf, he said. It couldn't walk fast enough. Cole crouched down. He checked the calf with practiced hands, then looked at Bella. Rain ran down his face. His expression was unguarded in a way she had not seen before. You could have left it, he said. I know, she said. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stood and removed his coat and put it around her shoulders without asking permission. It was too large. It smelled of horses and wood smoke. She pulled it tighter. They sat on the hillside together until the rain eased, the calf between them, the flooded barn below, and neither of them spoke because neither of them needed to. After the storm, the ranch hands talked. Not unkindly. With the particular respect men gave to someone who had proven themselves in mud and rain, rather than in conversation. The town took longer. It was Ruth at the general store who shifted things first. She mentioned, to no one in particular, that Bella Reynolds had carried a newborn calf out of a flooding barn alone. The story moved through Harrow Creek the way true stories did, without embellishment, because the truth was already sufficient. Cal Mercer, who owned the neighboring spread and had made several pointed remarks about mail-order arrangements in the early weeks, stopped making them. He did not apologize. He simply stopped, which in Harrow Creek amounted to the same thing. 2 weeks later, the physical border of the ranch was tested. Cal Mercer's men drove 70 head of steers directly across the western boundary line, letting them graze on the fresh grass near the Reynolds main spring. Cole saw the dust from the ridge. He rode down to the creek line immediately, his rifle held flat across his saddle. Bella followed 30 yards behind on her gray mare, carrying the leather-bound land survey log she had found in the ranch office. 3 of Mercer's cowboys stood by the water, their horses drinking. "This water belongs to the Reynolds deed," Cole said, stopping his horse 10 feet away. His voice was low, his right thumb resting near the rifle's hammer. The lead cowboy, a scarred man named Hank, spat into the mud. "Mercer's cattle have water rights here since '68, Reynolds. Your uncle never put up a wire." "The wire goes up next week," Cole said. "Move them out." Hank reached slowly for his lasso, his eyes narrowing. Mercer didn't sign off on any new wire. Before the tension could snap, Bella pulled her mare directly between the 2 men. She opened the heavy leather log across her knee, her fingers flipping directly to a yellowed page with a blue wax seal. "The Treaty of '68 adjusted the boundary 300 yards west, Mr. Hank," Bella said. Her voice was perfectly crisp, cutting through the wind. "Your employer sold that exact parcel to the land office in '72 to cover his back taxes. Here is the legal receipt number, filed in the county court." She pointed a gloved finger at the inked text. "If your steers drink here for another hour, you are legally liable for $40 of timber and water damage. I have already logged the brand numbers." Hank looked at the blue wax seal, then at Bella's unblinking eyes. He didn't look at Cole's rifle anymore. He looked at the paperwork. "We were just cooling them off, ma'am," Hank muttered, his tone shifting completely. "They look cool enough now," Bella said, closing the book with a heavy thud. "Move them back to Mercer's side." Hank waved his hat at the steers, shouting to his men. Within 10 minutes, the cattle were moving away from the water, their hooves splashing back toward the western ridge. Cole lowered his rifle slowly. He looked at the heavy book on Bella's knee. "You found the tax receipt," Cole said. "Your uncle kept very good records," Bella said, turning her horse back toward the house. "He just didn't know how to use them against Cal Mercer." Cole rode beside her, his horse matching her pace exactly. The schoolteacher, a young woman named Ada, stopped Bella outside the store one afternoon. "My students have been asking about you," Ada said. Bella raised an eyebrow. "The calf," Ada said. "Tommy Briggs told everyone his father saw you carry it up the hill." She paused. "They think you're remarkable." Bella looked at her. "I was just practical." "That's what makes it remarkable," Ada said. November brought cold that settled into the bones of the house. Bella learned the rhythms of the ranch the way she had learned everything, through observation and repetition. She learned which horses needed patience and which needed firmness. She learned that Cole took his coffee black and his supper without complaint, but that he noticed when something was done well, even if he said nothing. She learned his silences. There were different kinds. The silence after a long day's work, heavy and satisfied. The silence when something troubled him, tighter, held closer. The silence he kept around his past, which she did not press. He had been in the war. She knew that from the solicitor's letter. She knew it from the way he sometimes went still at sudden loud sounds, the way his hands moved with the particular efficiency of someone trained to act before thinking. She did not ask about it. She waited. One evening in late November, he came in from the barn later than usual. She had kept supper warm. He sat down and ate without speaking. When he finished, he remained at the table, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup, looking at nothing. "You don't have to tell me," Bella said quietly. He looked up. "Whatever it is," she said. "You don't have to." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Lost 2 men under my command," he said finally. "End of the war. Ambush. I made the call that put them in that position." Bella did not offer comfort. She did not say it wasn't his fault. She understood that some things were not helped by being argued with. "You've been carrying that a long time," she said. "Yes. Does it get lighter?" He considered the question seriously. "Some days." She nodded. She refilled his coffee without being asked. She sat back down and picked up the mending she had set aside. They stayed at the table together for another hour. The fire burned low. Outside, the wind moved through the grass. Neither of them spoke again, but the silence had changed its shape entirely. December arrived with a land dispute that had been building since summer. A railroad company had been quietly buying up parcels along the valley, using intermediaries and legal language designed to obscure the intent. 3 smaller ranchers had already sold, not knowing what they were selling to. Now the company's representative arrived in Harrow Creek with papers and a polished manner and an offer for Cole's land that was framed as generosity but structured as pressure. Cole read the papers at the kitchen table. His expression did not change. Bella read them after him. "This clause," she said, pointing. "It gives them right of access across the north pasture regardless of whether you sell the main parcel." Cole looked at the page. "If you sign this," Bella continued, "you lose the water access. The north pasture becomes useless without it. They don't need to buy the whole ranch. They just need you to sign this." Cole was very still. "My father's lawyer used similar language once," Bella said. "In a timber agreement. By the time we understood what it meant, the damage was done." Cole stood. He folded the papers and set them aside. "I'll need to speak to the other ranchers." "I can write the letters," Bella said, "if you tell me what you want to say." He looked at her. "You'd do that." "We have the same interest in this land," she said simply. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly. Something deeper than surprise. Recognition, perhaps. The particular look of a man who has been alone long enough that being understood feels like something he had stopped expecting. "Yes," he said quietly. "We do." The meeting of ranchers happened 3 days later in the back room of Ruth's store. Cole spoke plainly. Bella had written the summary of the legal language, clear and precise, and Cole passed it around the table without attribution. But Ruth had told people who had written it. When the meeting ended and the ranchers had agreed to refuse the railroad's terms collectively, Cal Mercer stopped beside Bella near the door. "That was good work," he said. He did not elaborate. He put on his hat and walked out. Ruth caught Bella's eye from across the room and nodded once. It was not a ceremony. There was no formal moment of acceptance. But Bella felt it nonetheless, the quiet shift of a town deciding that a person belonged. Christmas came quietly to the Reynolds ranch. Bella had not expected celebration. She had not asked for it. She decorated the house modestly, a pine bough above the door, candles in the window, the small things her mother had always done that made a house feel inhabited rather than merely occupied. Cole came in from the barn on Christmas morning to find the kitchen warm and the table set with more care than usual. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know," Bella said. "Sit down." He sat. She set a plate in front of him. He looked at it, then at her, then at the pine bough above the door. "My mother used to do that," he said. Bella sat across from him. "Mine too." They ate in the particular quiet of two people who have stopped performing ease and arrived at the real thing. After breakfast, Cole disappeared into the barn. He returned an hour later carrying something wrapped in burlap. He set it on the table in front of Bella without ceremony. She unwrapped it. A small wooden box, hand-fitted, the joints clean and precise. Inside, a set of account ledgers, new, their spines uncracked. "For the ranch records," Cole said. "You've been using the old ones. They're falling apart." Bella ran her hand across the cover of the top ledger. She understood the gift. Not the ledgers themselves, but what they represented. A place. A permanence. An acknowledgement that her work here was not temporary. "Thank you," she said. Cole nodded. He picked up his coffee. Outside the snow had begun, soft and unhurried, settling over the valley like a held breath finally released. January brought the hardest cold of the season, and a crisis that arrived without warning. A fire started in the Henderson barn, 2 miles east, on a night when the wind was wrong. By the time anyone saw the smoke, it had already taken the roof. The Henderson family had 3 children and no neighbors close enough to help quickly. Cole was saddled and riding before Bella had finished pulling on her coat. She followed on the gray mare, the one Cole had been teaching her to handle in the weeks since the cattle drive. They arrived to find the barn gone and the house threatened. The wind was pushing embers toward the eaves. Cole organized the men who had come, directing water lines, breaking fire breaks in the frozen ground. Bella went to the house. Mrs. Henderson stood in the yard with her youngest child on her hip, her face blank with shock. The 2 older children were inside, she said. She had not been able to get them out. Bella went in. The smoke was low and thick. She found the children in the back bedroom, the older one holding the younger, both of them pressed against the far wall. She spoke to them calmly. She did not rush them. She moved them toward the door with steady hands and a steady voice, and got them outside into the cold air. Mrs. Henderson made a sound that was not quite a word when she saw them. Cole was there when Bella emerged. He had seen her go in. He had not followed because he had trusted her to come back out, and that trust, she understood later, was its own kind of declaration. He looked at her in the firelight. Smoke-stained, her hair loose, her coat singed at the sleeve. "The children," he said. "Safe." He exhaled. He reached out and took her hand. Not dramatically. Not with words. He simply held it, standing beside her in the cold, watching the men work, and did not let go. February. The ranch had settled into its winter rhythms. The days were short and cold and full of work. The evenings were long and quiet and increasingly, without either of them deciding it, shared. Cole had begun talking more. Not much, but more. He told her about the land, its history, the years he had spent building it after the war. He told her about his uncle, the man who had left him the ranch, a difficult man who had shown love through expectation rather than tenderness. He told her about the inheritance clause, the requirement for a wife, with a directness that acknowledged the awkwardness of it without apology. "I should have written more honestly," he said one evening. "In the letters." "You wrote honestly," Bella said. "You wrote practically. It's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." Cole looked at her across the table. The lamp between them cast warm light. Outside the wind moved through the frozen grass. "I didn't expect you," he said. Bella waited. "I expected someone who would manage the house and satisfy the legal requirement," he said. "I didn't expect someone who would count cattle and carry calves and understand railroad contracts. I didn't expect someone who would put his coat around my shoulders in the rain," Bella said quietly. Cole was still. "Or teach me to ride properly," she continued. "Or trust me to go into a burning house." "I knew you'd come back out," he said. "I know you did," she said. "That's what I mean." The fire crackled. The lamp burned steady. Cole reached across the table and covered her hand with his, the same way he had in the firelight outside the Henderson barn. Deliberate. Unhurried. "Bella," he said. She turned her hand over beneath his. "I'd like this to be a real marriage," he said. "If you're willing." She looked at him for a long moment. At the scar along his jaw. At the careful steadiness of his eyes. At the man who had never once asked her to be less than she was. "I'm willing," she said. Spring came to Harrow Creek the way it always did, slowly and then all at once. The valley turned green. The creek ran full and clear. The cattle moved back to the north pasture, the fence repaired and solid. The calf Bella had carried through the flood stood in the morning sun, grown strong and entirely unaware of its own history. Bella stood at the kitchen window with her coffee, watching Cole cross the yard toward the barn. He moved with the unhurried purpose she had come to know as his natural state. He paused at the gate, looked back at the house, and found her in the window. He raised one hand. A small gesture. Unremarkable to anyone watching. She raised hers in return. Ruth had told her last week, with the particular satisfaction of someone delivering news they had been waiting to deliver, that the town had stopped talking about where Bella came from. They had started talking about what she had done. The railroad dispute. The Henderson children. The ranch accounts, which were the most organized in the valley. "You're one of us now," Ruth had said, as if announcing a verdict. Bella had not corrected her. She had simply said thank you, and meant it in a way that surprised her with its depth. She set down her coffee and went outside. Cole was at the barn door. He looked up as she approached. "Fence on the south pasture needs checking," he said. "I know," she said. "I saw it yesterday." He handed her the gray mare's reins without being asked. They rode out together into the morning, the valley wide and green around them, the hills purple in the early light. The land stretched in every direction, familiar now, known in the way that only comes from working something with your hands and your whole self. Bella Hamilton had come to Harrow Creek with a trunk, a satchel, and a practical arrangement. She rode back each evening to a home she had built, a man who had chosen her openly, and a life that fit her in ways she had stopped believing were possible. The valley held them both. The work continued. The seasons turned. And that, she had learned, was what belonging felt like.